Oh, no, sorry, I'm missing Brian. You don't do the roll.
No, ma'am.
But, should I say something?
You can. Okay. Just that we have regrets from councillors.
Yep. Oh my God, did I throw my pen away? Did he? Okay. Okay. I see Councillor Marchand is with us. Just getting something.
Be back in a second. That hour in bylaw goes by very quick. Oh, there it is.
Okay, so it is 7:02. Apologies to those who have been waiting for us. Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for a motion to take us out of recess. Moved by Councillor Mumbercat to come out of recess. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion is carried. Welcome, everyone, to this month's Committee of the Whole meeting, now resuming after recess. Reminder, we're being recorded. You can watch this on a live stream on our YouTube station or at your convenience on that channel, or it is aired on Tell-Il for the next 7 days. Just some discussion, just a notice that we discussed at our last council meeting in December, that this is now the first of our Tuesday meetings. So hopefully we didn't cause too much confusion for anyone. I'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered here today in Unama'ki, the land of the fog, a part of Mi'kma'ki, an unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people since time immemorial. We honor and thank the Mi'kmaq for sharing their land and home with us. So you have an agenda in front of you that was circulated last week. Are there any additions to the agenda as circulated? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Moved by Deputy Warden Sampson. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. I should have said, apologies, Councillor Sampson is not with us. He sends his regrets for this evening. The next item on the agenda is the review of the minutes. They're on page 4 to 8 of your package. That is the meeting for Committee of the Whole held on December 2nd. Are there any errors or omissions to the minutes as circulated? I hear none, so I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes as circulated. Moved by Deputy Warden Sampson to adopt the minutes as circulated. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. The motion on the floor is to adopt the December 2nd, 2024 meeting minutes as circulated. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. So we're at the presentation part of this evening's meeting. So we have two presentations to council this evening. The first presentation, and there is quite a lot of documentation for folks who may be watching at home, quite a lot of documentation, so thanks for the weekend reading. So this presentation is going to be just the one person?
I'm just going to say, Phil is online, and then Martin.
Oh, is he? Oh, okay.
Blair McDougall here from Wessie as well.
Okay, great. So we have Blair McDougall is here. Welcome to come to the mic if you'd like, or just sit in the gallery and enjoy if you prefer. And we have Martin Thompson, who is the Manager of Energy Sector Development with Municipality of the County of Richmond and the Town of Port Hawkesbury. and Phil Nash, who is the project engineer from WESI, which is the Waterford Energies Services Incorporated. So thank you, three of you, for joining us. The presentation tonight is on the Strait of Canso Sustainable Infrastructure Strategy. So thank you both.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Warden, and thanks, Council. Thanks for allowing us to speak here today. It'll be a bit of a double act, or maybe even a triple act between Blair and Phil from Waterford Energy Services and myself. Basically, I will speak a little bit in the beginning about the context around how this work has come about before I hand over to Phil, who will present some of the key findings and highlights from the report that form part of your packages, and I think also was shared with you a little bit earlier in previous week. So after Phil has done his presentation, I will then speak again to sort of go into some of the next steps, what follows from the strategy. So this piece of work forms part of a wider program of activity that we call the Strait of Canso Green Energy Capacity Building Program. It's quite the mouthful, I realize. This program came about through a funding proposal that was submitted to the then Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources and Renewables and Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency for a combined figure of $800,000. The Municipality of the County of Richmond and the town of Port Hawkesbury both contribute $75,000 over a 3-year period, which was a decision made by previous councils in both municipalities. So that takes the full project or program costs to $950,000. So in addition to the infrastructure strategy, the program also includes a feasibility study for an offshore wind center of excellence and the staff position, that is me. The Offshore Wind Centre of Excellence will be presented to Council at a later date once it's completed. We have a separate team of consultants working on that one. That piece of work is a month or two behind the infrastructure strategy that we're talking about today. In terms of my position, my responsibilities as Manager of Energy Sector Development have been to oversee and support both sets of consultants on these two pieces of work. And now that these reports are being completed, I will be responsible for ensuring that we keep momentum and start to implement the recommendations that the consultants have come up with. I also support existing businesses in the area that has green energy ambitions, and I respond to investment inquiries from potential new investors, and I work closely with the local REN in that work. I also try and seek out new opportunities for Port Hawkesbury and Richmond County in the green energy sphere. So, for example, we have a pending application with the Nova Scotia Clean Fuels Fund, which is an example thereof. Okay, so back to the infrastructure strategy. This work is meant to increase the understanding of the assets in the strait as they relate to green energy. So roughly speaking, there were 3 motivations for this. One, as these are new industries, there is a need to increase understanding among local stakeholders of what we have, but also what we can be. 2, provide a platform from which we can market the area and the opportunities that we have for investment. And 3, understand where the Strait of Canso fits in strategically alongside other ports in the region. So, for example, there's some wider strategic reviews of port readiness for offshore wind in the region happening. And this sort of deep dive that Waterford Energy Services has done into the Strait of Canso will help to inform those studies as well. So a project steering committee was established early on that consists of the 3 funding organizations that I mentioned before, as well as a representative from the municipality of the district of Guysborough. So this strategy relates both to the Cape Breton side and the mainland side of the Strait of Canso. Around this time last year, we had developed the RFP and had it out for tender, and following competitive procurement process, we awarded the contract to Waterford Energy Services. So just quickly on the scope of the exercise really focused on 3 sectors of the green energy industry. So green hydrogen and green ammonia production and export, onshore wind and offshore wind. And through that lens, we have asked Waterford Energy Services to define what the needs of industry are, analyze current port infrastructure capacity and readiness in the Strait of Canso, analyze current industrial infrastructure in the Strait of Canso, and identify some of the opportunities that exist both more directly but also indirectly. We also asked them to review and present some case studies from ports elsewhere that have gone through a similar transition. And finally, propose potential plans for what development could look like and how it could be phased. So with that, I'll hand over to Phil, who's hopefully still on the line, who will take you through some of the highlights in the report.
Is that okay for everyone?
Yep.
Perfect.
Can you hear us,
Thanks,
Bill?
Martin. Yep. Yep, it's all good here. So, thanks everyone for having us, and appreciate the opportunity to present here tonight. As Martin said, the project engineer of Waterford, a consulting company out of Halifax. I'm going to talk about the project overview. I'm going to break it down into onshore wind, hydrogen or power to X, port requirements, offshore wind, and then some conclusions and recommendations. And there are quite a few slides, so I will be going fairly quickly through a few of them. So kicked off January last year, set up a meeting schedule, presented our plans, and looked at the participants who we would want to talk to as part of the study. Research and background, so previous studies that have been done in the area, looking at international ports, as Martin said. Outreach to stakeholders was a big component to understand the capacities and what was there in the area. And then looking at the needs and matching those needs with the capabilities of the strait. And then obviously the report and the presentation that we're doing tonight. So the objective of the study, as Mark said, to understand the Strait of Canso infrastructure. Port infrastructure was a big piece of it, obviously, and the industrial parks. What's available and or needed to support renewable energy projects. So in parallel, Wesley was actively working projects in Sheet Harbor, Sydney, visiting ports in Maine, Providence, Rhode Island, New Bedford, Massachusetts, and France. So building our capacity and our knowledge of the industry, of trends, and of capacities of areas like the U.S. where we may support. So the background review of Canso studies. There have been studies done in the area in the past for other industries or other development potential. Again, as Martin said, we looked at international ports. What did they do to integrate themselves into the renewable industry? What changes do they have to make? What kind of infrastructure do they need to be part of that industry? The U.S. port capacity is a big piece. What's in place now and new developments that are coming? The Canadian offshore wind market is not yet developed, but the U.S. has obviously started, and Canadian ports are already supporting that industry. So we wanted to understand what opportunities the U.S. has for Canada. And then outline requirements for ports based on activity. So if you talk about offshore wind, fixed versus floating, there's different needs for ports and supporting area for those different types of technology. And that when it comes to marshaling or fabrication, operations and maintenance or manufacturing. So both of those require some different key pieces. The stakeholder engagement obviously was a significant effort to connect with the stakeholders who are key to the study, and we were happy to say we connected with almost everyone up and down both sides of the strait. We reached out to 30 organizations and had conversations with 16 of those face-to-face and the rest with virtual meetings. Some of the key takeaways, generally supportive of the project scope and the potential for the strait. There was obviously people that were unaware of this, the port was ongoing when we did talk to them. They provided key insights to their facilities, now allowed us to make a judgment as to what they can and can't do, what the expansion capabilities may be there. And the other one was sort of unclear of what renewable opportunities may come to the strait and their particular site. And that's just because of the unknown development schedule. The Canadian offshore wind market is probably 7+ years away if there's a seabed lease in 2025. And the U.S. wind industry obviously is trying to utilize their existing ports and the local ports as much as they can. So what may come to the strait and other ports in Nova Scotia and Canada is still, to be determined at times. So a snapshot of the folks that we talked to, so you recognize most of the names around the strait, as well as a few names from outside the area. So again, go through the presentation here now. We'll start with onshore wind, power to X, offshore wind, etc. So for onshore wind, as we talked to the stakeholders in the area, it became clear that there's a massive amount of onshore wind that's also planned. And the impact that that has is because of the size of the turbines and where the products are coming from, port infrastructure will be required to accept components to build these wind farms. So what we needed to understand was, while these ports were being used for onshore wind, they may be not available for offshore wind or for other activities. So we wanted to try to match up what was being used and over what kind of time frame. So greater than 3.5 gigawatts of onshore wind is in the forecast, and a lot of that is in Guysborough County in the Mulgrave area. And the majority of that is to support the Power-to-X projects, so the hydrogen projects. So as a result of the location on the mainland of most of those wind farms, the Mulgrave Marine Terminal is ideally situated to land the components and then distribute them off-site through the road network to their location. And the projects are expected to run from 2025 to 2030 and beyond, depending on the phase of development that some of these projects have. So it's a large potential scope of work for the Strait, and it's definitely more immediate scope than fixed or floating turbines currently. The one caveat about all that activity is that most of those projects are to support Power-to-X, and so there's some uncertainty as well on that development. You know, we have MOUs with Germany and countries to export ammonia, but we've seen, you know, not firm commitments on sale and things like that. So the onshore wind farms are not going to be required until there's more firm commitment on the hydrogen ammonia side. So on the Power-to-X, plants are based in Point Tupper, Everwind, and Bear Head have the proposals. And so what we have is electricity being generated on the mainland on one side and the facilities on the other. So the electricity, the energy is going to be needed to be moved across the Strait, which will involve cables or overhead lines. And the components that are needed to build the facilities, the physical components, because they're so large, they cannot land on the mainland side. So Strait Superport Mulgrave Terminal cannot be used to accept those components and then drive across the causeway. So therefore, they must be received via water in Point Tupper. And right now, each of those developers is pursuing their own wharf structure to do that. But in light of that fact, one of the conclusions and recommendations that we talk about is that a common user port on the Point Tupper side could be a solution to support both of those industries and not have multiple ports being built accepting similar components. The issue, obviously, is timing and development permit and plan and things like that for the common user port. So when we talk about the offshore wind industry now, what does it need? So we looked at international ports supporting the offshore renewables, and we looked at what's being done in the magnitude of operations for these marshalling, fabrication, construction, operations, maintenance, and then manufacturing and loaded of components. So a quick snapshot here. So some of the terminology, hopefully a lot of you are familiar with. Basically, we looked at the components that would be broken down and installed one by one at an offshore wind farm, the space requirements, the quayside bearing capacity because these components are so large and heavy, and then the water depth, and that's related to the vessels that are coming. So a lot of these components will come on heavy lift vessels from European ports, and they need deep draft in order to land the components wherever they're going to land them. And then obviously the equipment sizes, you know, blades, monopiles up to 100 meters long and blades 110 plus meters long. Similarly, for floating, we have a lot of the same components that are associated with the components for our floating wind. But what we have is some separate and large needs as well for a crane. A lot of the integration work and the towers and things are built near shore for floating, so there's extra space needed for that. The anchors and mooring chains are another component that are associated with floating, and then obviously the foundations themselves. So the driver behind floating is obviously the water depth that's being used, but that it can be built on shore and then floated off to its location and installed in location. But that requires a large land area, obviously with heavy bearing capacity, and then a deep draft in order to float the components away. The O&M component also becomes larger for floating because if the event of a major repair, like a blade, those can be towed to port but then you need more laydown space, and you need a deeper draft because these foundations are going to need a deep draft in order to get to location, or get it to a port. Sorry, on the manufacturing side, so if we look at a manufacturing facility for some of these components, again, large or fairly large land usage for most of them, and deep draft, and that's associated with these heavy lift vessels that come and load these components on to distribute them throughout the world. Whoops, sorry, skip ahead. This may be hard to read, it's obviously in the packages and that, but this is a scan basically of all the port structures in the Strait area. Start from Martin Marietta and going down through the existing ports, and at the bottom we have Everwind's proposed wharf, Bearhead's proposals for the jetty and the wharf, and then the Melfort terminal. And the reason for including Melfort is obviously the capacity that it could bring to the area, and it's a greenfield development. So the biggest thing you see from the locations here is shallow water depths at the majority of the ports, very little laydown area on the wharfs or behind the wharf areas for a lot of these locations. And so when we're looking at 50 to 60 acres needed for some of the components for storage, and you see that that doesn't really exist in the current state of the strait. So in looking at that, and back to the common user port theme, we identified an area at Cass Cove where there's potential for a common user port. So this is kind of a central area between the Port Hawkesbury paper facility and the Nova Scotia power plant. There is some utilization of the lands currently, and what you see here is a rendering with the port extending out, and so a significant amount of infilling would also be required. And that's also required for two reasons. One, to gain some space, and the second is to get to 14 meters of water draft. The reason 14 meters is used in this case is to try to future-proof. So we've seen vessel sizes grow, the weights of the monopiles grow, and we see the industry continuing to go in that direction. 15 megawatt turbines today offshore may become 22, 25 plus megawatt turbines in the future. So we looked at a deeper water depth. This site here, its current rendering, again, we show some components on it. It wouldn't necessarily be restricted for or designed for full use as a wind resource, wind renewable power port. We look at this as an area that can supply local users on that side of the strait, on the Cape Breton side, the ability to reach water access to move their products. Potentially new industries evolve due to the hydrogen, ammonia, and green electrons that are in the area, and manufacturing facilities, et cetera, that may develop, and they will need a location in order to export their products. And with the Melfort terminal, so many of you have seen that rendering Melfort as a container terminal. Due to the space that they have available to them, what we've done is we've not touched their existing footprint. We've added on a footprint to the north and showed how it could potentially support the renewable industry. So here we have blades and tower sections laid down, a heavy lift vessel up at the port, and obviously with the laydown area in behind, you have room to expand in behind or make this area larger as well, depending on what type of facility that you wanted this to be. So whether it's a manufacturing facility, whether it's a marshalling area, there is room for expansion at Melfort, and it would complement nicely the container terminal area without compromising either activity. So, excuse me, we put together a scorecard based on the main topics: manufacturing, assembly, fabrication, marshalling, integration, and operations and maintenance. And so if you look at the scorecard, you see a lot of the areas right now in the strait, even with some work, don't look like they have a lot of potential to support them. And this could be due to lack of space. Like I said, we need a lot of acreage for some of these activities. A deep draft, so upgrading a wharf at Cabot Gypsum may get you a deep draft, but there's no laydown area in the area. Mulgrave is very similar, very small laydown area, even though they have the draft that will accept some of the vessels to date. But operations and maintenance is certainly an activity that right now could happen at Mulgrave were we to have activity in our Canadian waters. So breaking that down a different way, we look at the hydrogen ammonia component receiving, because we know that's an activity that needs to happen on the Cape Breton side. So Melford or Melgrave, if it were in existence, could accept the heavy lift vessels and receive the components, but they would still then need to be transported across the water and land somewhere on the other side. So we do have some locations that are potential to bring in shallower vessels on the Cape Breton side. Onshore wind component receiving, very similar, and obviously with the amount of activity and where it's located, Mulgrave is an ideal location. Onshore wind storage, though, there's still a lack of storage in the area of Mulgrave to store many components, so they need to leave location relatively quickly. When we look at offshore, now we're talking with the larger components, and marshalling of those components is going to need a significant amount of space and bearing capacity, so there's upgrades would be needed to any location that's looking to support that. And that would be no different for the Canadian fixed bottom installations. When it comes to floating, again, even deeper draft, more bearing capacity, more laydown area due to the larger components and the foundations and things. Major repairs can happen at certain locations, but again, it's going to take some effort to be a part of that. And then the servicing side, potential at each of the areas, and Mulgrave is certainly has potential now. So we look at conclusions. So the volume of onshore wind planned for Nova Scotia is a great opportunity for the Strait area. So turbine, component delivery, and then access as well to the green electrons that would be there. And the onshore wind cost and volume, it actually may cause a challenge to the viability of the offshore wind. So due to the fact that the onshore wind is going to be more cost competitive, that may inhibit some of the funds that are available to the offshore developers. When it comes to Point Tupper, port solutions required to support the hydrogen projects, so the receiving of those components. This isn't the export of the product, but the receiving of the components. So in this light, the opportunity is to utilize a common user port to support all these projects. And then that common user port would be an asset which would outlive the life of these projects. So the existing strait ports do not extend into waters deep enough to support heavy transport and installation vessels associated with the wind farm construction. So we need new wharfs or modifications to existing ones to be part of the industry. The U.S. offshore wind can be supported by Canadian ports. However, if the supply chain from Europe changes to a more local industry, i.e. the states start to develop and manufacture their own components, there's a risk of opportunities to Canada will be reduced. So as long as they're coming from Europe, we're in the path. If they don't come from Europe, the Canadian ports wouldn't have as much use. And then as far as Atlantic Canada, an Atlantic Canada Constellation port approach. So you look at any project that's built these days in Europe or US or other areas, multiple ports are used. So we have monopiles at one port, we have cables at another, we have turbines and blades at another. So this same feature will likely happen in Canada for our own development, plus the supporting of other developments in the US. So one port doesn't need to do it all. So when we look at Atlantic Canada as a whole, we can support many things, and even smaller ports can do a piece of the action, but they may not be able to do the larger components, and that's okay. But they can do what they can do, and they can contribute and keep ports from being congested with multiple activities. So then we need to think about the role for the Strait. So if we're attracting a renewable energy industry, original equipment manufacturer, an OEM, is a strategic endeavor which can complement the port capabilities of the region. So blades, cables, foundations, or towers. These things are needed in all these industry and all these developments, both in Canada and the U.S., and they would outlive a parking lot for pieces that come in for 6 months and then leave again. Support a larger workforce as well. The O&M basis, so operations and maintenance basis for offshore wind farms, can be supported from the Strait's local industry and workforce. However, this won't be needed until Canadian offshore wind takes hold, which looks like it's 2032 or beyond. So the near-term efforts in the Strait should be to support the onshore wind, the more near-term opportunity we have, and the hydrogen ammonia markets. So optimize logistics for the wind turbine component receiving via Mulgrave, provide storage areas for the components to avoid congestion on the wharf. Longer term, the Melford terminal construction to support the container and renewable energy industry. And in development of that site, contemplate both fixed bottom and floating capabilities, as it is a site that could take on whatever capacity is needed. pursue the common user port on Point Tupper so it can support industry without water access, receiving wind turbine components on Cape Breton Island side for wind farms that may be developed there, potential for marshalling, fabrication, manufacturing, O&M of offshore turbine components, and so further analysis of Cass Cove location as a common user port on Point Tupper would be suggested. And Martin, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Phil. I think we're at time. I have 2 slides, about 3 minutes. Happy to go through them if we have time. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So in terms of next steps, we're presenting the strategy to the town of Port Hawkesbury on Tuesday next week, 21st of January, after which we will look to publish it later in the month. And from there, we'll start further engagement with industrial stakeholders that have been identified in the strategy to further nail down what do the owners of infrastructure have an interest in pursuing out of these recommendations and findings from the strategy. And then we'll start to develop some implementation plans from that. A way to utilize the strategy in the short term is to use it as a platform for marketing the opportunities in the area. So the intention is to use the information from the report to set up a digital sort of one-stop shop for the port information that has been highlighted. So this would basically highlight the specification of each port asset in one place. And we're thinking that a good location for this is to host it on the straightofcancer.ca that Rochelle Sampson from Cape Breton Partnership spoke about at last month's Committee of the Whole here. And this, in turn, then sets up for broader regional collaboration on ports in relation to offshore wind in particular. So, for example, Net Zero Atlantic awarded their contract for an assessment of Atlantic Canadian ports to support offshore wind development in November. And that won't go into as much detail in each of the ports in Atlantic Canada as this strategy has done. So our local strategy will ensure that we are well represented within that broader study. And I also hope that the piece of work Net Zero Atlantic is doing is the first step in a proper and genuine port collaboration on offshore wind across Atlantic Canada. And again, this strategy helps us to get our own ducks in a row to participate fully in that type of collaboration. So the strategy has given us a good idea of how our infrastructure matches up against the requirements of each offshore wind deployment phase. However, we won't know the exact requirements of industry until we've had the auction round for seabed licensing, which is expected to take place at some point this year. That will provide, once that comes, that will provide us with clarity on actual location of projects, who the developers are, what technology will be used, and from that we'll have a much better idea of the specific port requirements. And from there we can start to understand how we fit alongside the other ports and seek to leverage investment into the needed and appropriate upgrades for the Strait of Canso. But right now the strategy can be used by anyone locally who is speaking to interested investors or stakeholders. This includes owners of port infrastructure themselves as well as any proponent of the area. You'll be able to draw out answers to most requests for information regarding green energy from this strategy, I dare say. Another next step for me is to explore this concept of a common use of port in Point Tupper a little bit further, because I really think this, in addition to what Phil said, this could unlock opportunities, as Phil said, for existing businesses in the park, but it could also increase the attraction of some or all the available land that there is in Point Tupper, both in public hands and in private hands, that doesn't have water access now. As has been stated, this concept probably lacks a clear business case at this point, but we do think there is merit in exploring it further. And interestingly, the Green Cement study that, again, was presented or talked about here last week, which was released a couple of months ago, bears quite strong commonalities with the findings in this strategy, particularly around Cass Cove and kind of bringing a corridor up to certain properties further up the park. So we'll continue to explore that avenue to bolster that business case. So these are some of the things that I will continue to work on with local stakeholders. And with that, we'll end it there. Thank you so much for listening us and letting us speak today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Really important information, and I will throw it out to councillors if they have any questions or comments. Councillor Marchand, are you waiting for your... Okay.
I guess this question on the first page of the document, it says, the Scotia Government will provide a 1 million dollar grant to the town of Port Hawkesbury to develop a common use port in Point Tupper. Is that
under ownership and report contents, you guys have this report, or all recommendations in this report are confidential. We have this on our website. So who's the confidentiality to?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It was actually a conversation we had a couple hours ago, Blair and I. So I think sort of a standout wording from Wesley went on it, but it will be changed.
Yeah, I can address that. So the disclaimer, or whatever you want to call it, on the second page is a boilerplate statement we put on reports we do for clients. In this case, we know and understand the information is the property of the client. In this case, this is you. And so we'll reword that disclaimer, so to speak. And of course, it's up on your website. We're well aware of that. Apologize for the confusion.
Any other comments or concerns, questions from other councillors?
I just have one.
Councillor Mumbercat.
Oh, look at my mirror. Here we go. Thanks, guys. Very comprehensive overview. I just wanted to ask, I guess, or maybe plant the seed, and perhaps this is more for, Troy and Martin to take away, but just looking at the opportunity you've presented here and the potential for the Point Tupper Park. We do have some Point Tupper information on our website right now. I think it'd be great to create, maybe if you could consider creating a bit of a landing spot for Point Tupper on our website. Right now, when you click on Point Tupper, I think it reverts you over to a Cape Breton Partnership website that has a lot of other information, really good information. But I'm just thinking maybe now that we have this, we could use it to kind of create a more substantial presence on our website to help promote the park. And I think that would line up really well with our discussions also, Warden, about, looking to kind of put more influence from the county into the development of the park going forward. So I'll just plant that seed and leave it at that. Thank you. Great work.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you for that. Do we have any other comments, concerns, questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much. We appreciate the time you took to come here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Phil.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So we have a second presentation this evening, and for those of you who follow along with your package, it's on page 129 to 157 of your package. So I'd like to welcome Stan Johnson from the Bredor Lakes Collaborative Environmental Planning Initiative, CEPI, regarding the Bredor Lakes CEPI and Bidaba. And I think we have two people.
I'm not Stan Johnson.
Okay.
We have to hit this too, don't we? Yes, I'm Ron Newcomb, and I'm the co-coordinator with Stan Johnson here of the Bredor Lakes Collaborative Environmental Planning Initiative. And Warden, thank you and Council for giving us the opportunity to come and speak to you today. We always like to come and visit you. We enjoy that. Although last time I think we had cookies, but...
Muffins. I believe it was blue muffins.
Yes, and I was mentioning earlier, often we speak to our provincial or federal partners, and we have to kind of promote the Bredor Lakes and its beauty and all that. I know I don't have to tell anyone here how amazing the Bredor Lakes are and how important they are to our island and the people who live around there, and the industry that's potential that's there, the tourism, so on and so forth. But what we do as the Bredor Lakes Collaborative Environmental Planning Initiative is address concerns that came up many decades ago about the pressures and possible harms that are affecting the Bredor Lakes and the quality of the environment. And of course that affects the people who live there too. If they're not happy, then you don't really have a good ecosystem if people don't have sustainable work and things like that. And so when this happened, it was a visionary Mi'kmaq elder who was able to get people together to talk about that. He got the decision makers to sit down at the same table. His name was Charlie Joe Dennis. if anyone knew him, but he was able to get those people to sit down and work towards common goals together, collaborate, and have a common discussion table for these things. And the process is all based on a Mi'kmaq concept called two-eyed seeing, if you've ever heard that expression before. To put it very basically, it says that you can't really have balanced decision-making unless you hear from all parties, hear both sides of the story. And Charlie Joe recognized that very much, and as I say, he was able to get all the Mi'kmaq chiefs here in Cape Breton, Unama'ki, all the mayors and wardens of the 5 communities, as well as some deputy ministers from the province, RDGs from the federal end of things. All those who would have some kind of jurisdiction or a stake in the Bredor Lakes to sit down together and begin this collaboration process, which is quite amazing when you think about it. In fact, it doesn't exist anywhere throughout Canada, and as far as we can tell, nowhere else in the world do you see all levels of government sit down, including Indigenous government, sit down together and calmly discuss issues that affect both sides. So it's an amazing thing. Now, here on this slide, you can actually see an image on the right there of the Bredor Lakes Charter that all those, back in 2005 it was signed, and all of the, as I said, the chiefs, the mayors and wardens, the deputy ministers, the RDGs, all signed that document at that time, committing their organizations to this process of collaborative governance of the Bredor Lakes. And after that, they worked, one of the first things they wanted to do was establish a management plan for the Bredor Lakes. That was released in 2011. Once again, a landmark document. Most legislators and academics would expect a management plan to be a list of do's and don'ts and rules to follow. And yet, considering two-eyed seeing, what they came up with in 2011 was actually a circular planning process. Recognizing that situations change, they're ever developing, there's a need for people to continually collaborate together and work together to make sure that we're always addressing the needs of the Bredor Lakes and the people that live there. So that was a little hard for some to accept in the beginning, but what we found now is that people have embraced this concept of two-eyed seeing, and it's been so successful to see people, more and more people want to get involved in this process. So on this next slide here, just to kind of go over the organizational structure of CEPI, we refer to those people who make up CEPI, the chiefs, the mayors and wardens, the RDGs, the deputy ministers, as our senior council. And those are the actual CEPI members. So Warden Landry, that would make you a CEPI member in the senior council. And obviously you don't have the time to go down to the shore of the Bredor Lake and do water sampling and so on. And so it was, although you might like to, in their wisdom back in 2005, the senior council appointed a management committee with representatives from each of the organizations, each of the levels of government, I should say. Councillor Mumberket represents the municipalities on our management committee. And also the Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources in Eskazoni serve as the secretariat for the management committee. And Stan and I were kind of the on-the-ground people who work day to day, making sure the collaborative process is always moving forward, trying to make sure we connect the right people with the right people to have those necessary discussions. From that, we also have a steering committee, and that's made up of not only representatives from each of these levels of government and all these organizations, but really it's open to anybody with a stake in the Bredor Lakes. So there's NGOs there, industry, many academics, so on, even concerned citizens. It's a chance really to be able to address, these are the people that actually live and work on the Bredor Lakes, so they're more in tune with what's happening there. We also have an elders council where we are able to have that side of the equation involved in the discussions, and a CEPI Youth Council. So we have those voices represented in the discussion as well, which is obviously very important to have them involved. And what their purpose is, these three parts of the committees, is to provide advice to the senior council, really to identify gaps in knowledge, gaps in policy, where are the areas of concern that really need your attention, gather information about those things to be able to inform the senior council to be able to help them in their decision-making process. And then out of that, if we ever discover that maybe there is a topic that needs more information, then we can create various task teams to maybe do more research, hire consultants, whatever the case is, to make sure that the senior council is always properly informed. Now, the senior council we bring together twice a year in person to sit down and actually work together. You've no doubt received our invitation for the meeting tomorrow. Actually, that will be online, so it won't be in person tomorrow. That's going to be an opportunity for us to just present to you what our proposed work plan and budget is for the next fiscal year coming up, so that when we speak to you again at the end of the fiscal year, we'll hopefully have your approval to move forward with that. One of the things we're actually going to address on that is the budget. We're supported, the senior council and all these members give their support to this collaborative process, first of all, just by being there at the table and part of that discussion. That's so important. Also, we have so much in-kind support from all these various organizations. We've tried to calculate the value of that in money, coming up with a figure of roughly $500,000 of people's time to come to meetings and resources that they contribute to this process. So that's quite amazing. But also, we obviously have bills to pay and salaries to pay and so on. So we do, the senior council members also have a financial commitment to the moving forward of this collaborative process as well. What we found, though, is that the amount of funding we receive from all the partners has basically been the same since 2005 up to today. Unfortunately, expenses, as we know, have gone up quite a bit since then. So in our presentations tomorrow, we have some ideas of how we think we could deal with that situation. So we're going to propose those tomorrow. Just moving on here, these are some excerpts from our terms of reference, but most importantly, we organize our work under 4 objective areas. Institutional, which we kind of refer to as our core work now, that of the work that Stan and I do in communicating with throughout the network, but also anything that would fall under social, cultural needs, or environmental needs, or economic needs. And then if we just move on there in the process, let's go down to the work that these are some of the current things that CEPI has been working on in the last few years. Bearschwa ponds, we've been doing some research in those areas just because we've found that these coastal ponds that we know all exist all around the lakes are extremely important to the health of the lakes. Scientists will tell us that they're breeding grounds for many animals and fish and so on. So we've been trying to research and catalog all these Bearschwa ponds and just learn why they're so vital and how we can continue to keep them healthy. Another one I could mention there is our CEPI youth. As I said, it's so important to have that voice in the conversation. And in fact, we had to drop the CEPI Youth Council from the work plan for a couple of years there just because the funding wasn't there to support them. So that's another thing we'd like to talk about tomorrow, is how we want to bring them back into the discussion. We also had been doing some work in the area of forestry, monitoring a particular site before forestry operations took place, water quality in streams and things like that around the area during the process. And the next step would be to do some sampling after the forestry operations have taken place to see how things have changed. Another area where the funding kind of dried up there and we weren't able to continue, but it looks like with some help and in-kind support from NSCC, some students are going to be involved in continuing on that monitoring, so that's going to be great. Tourism is also a huge area that we've been working on. It's kind of works hand in hand with sport fishing. But I would actually like to highlight the Two-Eyed Scene Conference that we held last year in 2023 to great success. It was just beyond what we had hoped for. We weren't even able to house everybody that wanted to attend or come as presenters, and go to our website and see all of the amazing things that took place there. We're still working at trying to consolidate the outcomes of that conference. But we are happy to announce that there will be a follow-up conference with workshops this year in November 2025, focused on two-eyed seeing and how we use that throughout our network and how we can continue to do so. And well, this is a kind of an interesting part that came out of the Bearschwa Ponds project. As we were doing research on these ponds, there's one particularly near Eskazoni called Amagwadi's Pond, and we discovered what is potentially an archaeological site there. There's some suspiciously ordered mounds that were in lines on the bottom of the pond, and when we investigated them, they seemed to be piles of oyster shells, which scientists will tell us may indicate early harvesting activities by the Mi'kmaq. Of course, all Mi'kmaq sites generally here in the Bredor Lakes are underwater now, so potentially it's a very exciting discovery. Stan and I, our job is basically to bring people together and organize the meetings. So a lot of times we just sit there and this stuff kind of goes over our heads, but we make sure everybody has coffee and and we try to record the meetings for them. But this was one actually that both and I, Stan and I, have taken training in underwater archaeology and these issues, so we're particularly interested in that one. SEPA Youth we already talked about. Yeah, so the other one that we wanted to talk about too was Explore the Bredor, is a festival that we've had now for 4 years, is it? Yeah. So it's run from the last week of July and the first week of August. We basically started it during COVID. The idea was really to just get all the communities around the lakes and all the different activities that take place in different communities and try to put them under one umbrella so that everyone in the lakes could share in everything that was going on, kind of bring people together and experience and exchange cultures and so on. And it's just kind of grown each year with support from a group called Oceans North has supported that. And we hope this year to expand it to include the entire year. The Nova Scotia Tourism and the destination Cape Breton are very interested in promoting the shoulder seasons here in Cape Breton because tourism obviously drops off quite a bit after Celtic Colors. And there is some funding available if we can get things going on in the shoulder season. So we're continuing to look in on that, and the co-chairs of that task team are Terry Smith from Destination Cape Breton and Robert Bernard from Insidan, pardon me. Yeah, and then the conference coming up this year. Book your space now. So many people left it too late last year in our network and weren't able to attend, but it's going to be held again in Sydney, probably in Member 2, I would say again. It's the only space big enough to house everybody, but we're very excited about that. For now, though, we are just so happy to have this opportunity to talk to you again about SEPI and Warden to make sure that you're part of that conversation that takes place. Now, there is a kind of an associated committee that, instead of dealing with all levels of government, really focuses on the leaders in the communities just here in Cape Breton, Unama'ki. And so I'll let Stan talk about that.
All right, what we're talking about here is bidubal, actually. Bidubal in our language, Mi'kmaq. You say if you put a blanket on the floor and you put a hole in it and you pour water, all that water would pour into an area. That's what the action of bidubal means. It's pouring into one. Basically, like 6,500 years ago when the water levels rose enough that it infilled the Bredor Lake. Before then, it used to be a series of lakes, so now it's just one big lake. And that's what it basically talks about. Now, the bidubal is made up of the municipalities, the municipality councillors from all around Cape Breton, as well as the First Nation councillors. So that's what makes up bidubal. And why bidubal? We do study impacts from sewage, from overflow from treatment plants during like storms and stuff, discharge from recreational boaters, go around the lake, inadequate sewage disposal for some cottages that we would have some worried about, and effects on invasive species. Discharge from recreational boaters. One of the things we did there was because a few years ago, A neighbor of mine came down at Crane Cove right on the water, and there was a slick that came in out on the shore there, and the kids were wondering what it was, and they were saying there's an oil slick, but we got it checked out, and basically one of our directors who was out metal detecting across the lake that Sunday, actually, on the summertime, saw an American yacht move into the McPhee Islands area there. And it was a pretty good-sized yacht, and then they left, and that's that afternoon, that slick shows up. We're figuring they dumped their sewage tanks out into the lake and just pulled off. So that's one of the issues we work about. There's lots of cottages, actually. There's we worked with a lady named Anna Curtis Steele, who we used to work with on Nova Scotia Environment. And she always told us about this grandfather clause that was in the system now, whereas back in 72, I think, whereas if you kept a part of your cottage up, like a porch or something, you can actually build a house around it and keep your current sewer system, whatever you had, was a straight pipe or whatever. So we had one of our associates at the meeting at Victoria Council last year, and she learned there was over 200 cottages around the lake that have straight pipes going into the lake. And with the discharge from boaters and stuff, like, as we all know, oysters are filter feeders, and they clean the lake. But with the MSX disease that has crippled the oyster industry in the Bridor Lake over the last few years, we figured those came from the Lunar gypsum plant when the ships used to come into the lake, drop their ballast into the lake to get under the bridge and then come back out. And whatever was in their system, like we figured it came from Virginia somewhere, was where they had that problem, an MSX problem. So it brought it to the lake. And as we all know now, there's pieces of it in PEI that's starting to bother it now. So so the impacts of sewage, oysters, other fishery operations, increased algae growth throughout the lake, health risks to recreational activities, a loss of ecosystem, traditional Mi'kmaq medicines around the lake that we're concerned about as well. So what we did was Peterborough took on we installed some pump out stations. We worked with some other groups, and there were 6 pump out stations around the lake. There's only 5 now. I think Dundee used to be one, but I think that's a private operation now, so the marina's no longer there. But like these pump out stations around the lake, and that actually when we explore the Bridor in the summertime, those 2 weeks, Ocean North worked with us during that time, and they actually pay for the pump out for anybody that wants to do pump outs during that 2-week period. So it's awesome time, and they're great partners of us. We helped Waikagama and Wegolma and the town of Waikagama actually work together on a joint sewage system that Bidubak helped with them a few years ago. Actually, they got their own sewage treatment system that was built through this organization. And right now we're looking at helping with the other communities as well, because I think when the Victoria County had their meeting, Bedek actually stopped building homes now because their sewage system is at capacity and they can't really move forward. So those are the kind of issues that we want to look at and help out with. We mapped some coastlines with climate change models. We did some of that work as well. We had a climate change conference in 2013. We held some workshops around the lake as well, and did develop some action plans. Assist some municipalities. We drafted climate action plans as well when we were working at them, those as well. Butler Lake, we did some Butler Lake water rangers. As we know, Butler Lake had some problem with water over a few years. I think they got it sorted out now, but we helped them with some issues. We did some water balance project, Member 2, CBR, and we did a Member 2 runoff diversion project with them. So other notable projects, dredging the silt was hampering boat navigation and all that stuff. We help with that as well. And we've facilitated dialogue between Inverness County and Wamaco leading to the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, that they have between the two communities, which they work on projects together. 2024 and beyond, basically, UINR, who's our stewards, actually working on some initiatives with our partners. We're doing actually, there's Bidubah meeting on the 24th, which is, it'd be great if one of a councilor here could appoint a member to join Bidubah. We're working on a project with the First Nation, what do they call the Municipality, FCM, whatever it's called. Remember that one? Yeah. They're working on a project now. We're actually checking out some watershed mapping around the lake to see how climate change affects and watershed data collection around the lake. That's the thing we're working on. Stakeholder engagement, March 31st. They started last year and will be ending this year. So they've done some work already, and they want to show they want to show at the next BDUBA meeting actually what they've done so far and how far they're at. And they want to keep working with our communities to work forward. We did a species at risk project. We call it Maliamugumsitkoamana. Basically, it's taking care of all the animals or beings around the lake. So we've developed workshops. That happened for 3 years prior to this, and then we have another 3-year extension coming. So I used to have another coordinator. I used to work with me now. Was running this project. He's been taking on working on that one. So actually moved on ahead. I was telling you, UINR, the Unamagi Data Water Collection Project, that's happening as well. Shoreline erosion control, which we're worried about. As we all know, around the lake, a lot of cottages, like the storms that are hitting the lake, are pretty bad these days. Like, we don't have ice on the lake anymore like we used to. I remember 20 years ago, we used to have snowmobile races on the lake, cars are on the ice. And, like, now you can hardly go ice fishing now to go find ice around anymore. So we're looking at all stuff like that, like Maligawach. We had the graveyard there that was pretty washed into the water a few years ago. They put some rocks there to sort of that emergency preparation, try to help it out. But over the years, so what happened was, as you all know, when you arbor a piece of shoreline, the deflection hits the adjacent area. So right now, like, I had a cottage was about 200 feet from where the graveyard was. I had about 30 feet of grass, had 2 trees, was a road, another piece of grass, and there was the shoreline. It was about 70 feet to the water where my cottage was. I gave away my cottage a couple of years ago. My cottage was 2 feet over the bank because of all the action coming off the rock wall down there. I went to go look at it this year, and where my cottage was, I had an outhouse out back, say maybe 20 feet behind the cabin. I went there this year. My outhouse is, again, near the water. That's how far it's gone, like, from then. So one of the things we look at is how can we mitigate this kind of stuff. Like, even Bodlodik there the graves are washing out at the island there. So how do we work with this? Like, we've gone to some areas out in Iona as well that they showed us some areas where it's getting bad. And how do we work on these? So we've got some ideas on how to do it, but we'll be bringing that kind of stuff towards at the end of this year. So, like, BDUBA basically works with all of us, and we aim to combine, like Ron was saying, like 2IC, and basically work with our both organizations. How can we develop Western science and our traditional knowledge from being here so long? How can we work with these areas and all the project problems that we have to find a common solution for everybody, right? So it's great. It's a great organization, and great people on it as well. And we've done some good work. And we just want to keep it forward and let everybody know that it's sort of, people always get confused with what SEPI and BDUBA does, but they're totally two different groups. So.
Thank you very much. That was great. I've heard some of the presentations before in previous council sessions, but it's been really informative. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's meetings. Do councillors have any comments or questions?
No, it's the big thanks. Great to see.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the really important work. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so we are moving on now to item 8 on the agenda, the Warden's Report. So on page 158 of your package is the Warden's Report for December. Certainly December was a short month in terms of work days, what with the Christmas holidays in there. Lots of meetings with service providers and stakeholders and partners, and those meetings are ongoing. Entertain any questions if you have any, but otherwise we'll move on to the CAO's items. So he has an administration operations report that he provides to us each month and highlights for us, thank you, the new information in yellow. So I know you've had a chance to take a look at that. Don't know if anybody wants to flag anything.
Thank you, Warden. It's not anything totally specific with that, but I just wanted to speak on an email that we received this week concerning the DCB financials and that they were confidential. I don't know if Troy's thought about it, but do we need a motion to remove confidentiality on that, or where's that confidentiality held at? Or because the intent of getting them was so certain people in the public could look at them.
So just some background, flesh that out a little bit. So we had some discussion over, was it, I don't remember if it was the last meeting or the meeting before, but we spoke about making a request to Destination Cape Breton to have copies of the financials sent to us. And so once council moved that and approved it, the CAO made the request. We as councillors got that information, and included in that was reference to confidentiality, that it was confidential information. So your question, and I'm great, so there's 4 of us now. So your question speaks to the reference in that email that the reports that we received are designated as confidential. So are you asking for some information from the CAO on that, or are you looking to make a motion, and if so, what?
Well, if the confidentiality is to council, we have the right to remove it. So I'd like to make a motion to do that, but maybe some direction from the CAO on if he's thought about it.
Madam Chair, through you to the council. I have, the confidentiality is not ours to control. It belongs at the board of the Destination Cape Breton. So again, I would have no problem, which we are one of many that sit on that board. We don't have sole authority over Destination Cape Breton. So I would, again, just simply request from DCB to lift the confidentiality that is on them. And in full disclosure, all of their financials from 24, 25 on are going to be open to the public. It's just up until that point, they weren't. And with that, I've passed them all along in that spirit, that if it was not released by their board in the past, it's not on us to release that. I can make the request, but I don't think it's within our power or authority to lift that.
Councillor Marshall?
It seems going back and forth with some public that we're asking for these sometime, within the last year and a half. DCB didn't mention anything about them being confidential, but they did say that councils do get them. I don't believe this council's gotten them in the past number of years. So I would make a motion that we ask the CAO to speak with DCB to find some way of removing the confidentiality on the 4 years of documents that he has presented to us.
So there's a motion on the floor for the CAO to reach out to Destination Cape Breton. Can I ask for clarification as to whether you mean Destination Cape Breton Board or the CEO of Destination? Hang on. So just the motion on the floor is to ask DCB for those to remove, so that we not have to be bound by the confidentiality of it. Is your request to the DCB board or to the executive director? Or do you want to reference both?
Reference both. Looking at the email where it seems that you secured these financials by kind of telling someone, I assume that's Terry, that you were going to ensure the confidentiality was with them. I guess he's the first to speak to, but if it has to go further, go to the board.
So with that clarification, there is a motion on the floor directing our CAO to speak to the executive director and or the board of Destination Cape Breton to allow Richmond County Council to release the financials without the confidentiality component. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Any thoughts? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. Moving to any other questions on the CAO's report? Hearing none, we'll move on to community acknowledgements. So just a reminder that last month, because of the Christmas holidays, we held our meetings on the first and third meeting, Monday of the month, as opposed to second and fourth. So we didn't get a chance to recognize our volunteer for November, so very happy to be able to do that tonight, and it is Leon Landry from here in Arishat. And so I'll speak a little, oh, sorry, Leon LeBlanc. LeBlanc, there you go. I'll hear about that later, I can assure you.
I think you will.
Probably from his whole family. So Leon LeBlanc, November's Volunteer of the Month. So Leon joined the Isle Madame Fire Department in 1976, became Fire Chief in 1983, a role he held for 25 years until his retirement in 2008. Beyond his firefighting career, Leon served on the board of directors for the Waverley Firefighting School and was an active member of the Strait Area Mutual Aid Organization. Leon spent several years coaching minor hockey, showcasing his commitment to supporting youth. His passion for music allowed him to volunteer at the Port Hawkesbury Nursing Home, the Richmond Villa, the St. Anne's Centre, sharing his talent and bringing joy to residents. Always ready to lend a hand, Leon frequently volunteered at community events, embodying the true spirit of generosity. Please join us in recognizing Leon for his hard work, dedication, and commitment to his community. We thank you for all you do in Richmond County. And I'd like to add, Councillor Sampson from District 1 is not here this evening, but in his place, I will just add that certainly Leon is extremely deserving of this recognition. As somebody who has family in each, or has or had family in each of the 3 nursing homes in the area, I can tell you that there is no greater blessing than to watch residents in those facilities enjoying the music that Leon and his partners in crime provide on a regular basis. So it's great, and I'm pretty sure he knows all the words to all the songs. So that's November, but we also now have a Volunteer of the Month for December, and that is a dynamic duo of Henrietta and Arthur Dore of River Bourgeois. So Henrietta and Arthur are cornerstones of our community. Henrietta began playing the church organ at 11 years old, and 60 years later, she continues to share her talent. She has also led the church choir and is involved in many local charities. Arthur's legacy is etched into the local church, where he designed and crafted the stained glass windows, the crosses on the doors, and the altar. Known as the go-to handyman, he is always available for repairs. Arthur has served as a Eucharistic minister, reader, and member of both the Parish Council and the Liturgical Committee for over 50 years. Arthur was a founding member of the Tara Lynn Centre, designing and drafting its plans, as well as those for the River Bourgeois Visitation Parlour. Together, Henrietta and Arthur exemplify unwavering dedication, creativity, and service to their community. Please join us in recognizing Henrietta and Arthur for their hard work, dedication, and commitment to their community. We thank you for all you do in Richmond County. Do you have anything you would like to add?
Okay, thank you, Warden. So I just want to mention that I had the pleasure of visiting Arthur and Henrietta and their visiting friend Sue yesterday to provide them with the gift from the county, and we had a great chat, and it was entertaining as always. So I would also like to kind of note that Henrietta has just finished up 60 years, I believe, she said, of playing the organ in the church in River Bourgeois as well, and there was an article in the newspaper about all of it. So worth a read. Get your copy of the report. Thank you.
Lovely. And as always, thank you to the volunteers and many others that we don't speak about individually at these meetings. Please know that your contributions are valued, and we recognize that really nothing happens without you. So moving on to correspondence, we have a couple of items that require some action, and so we'll begin with those. So the first is request from Jennifer Enright from the Canadian Amyloidosis Support Network volunteer regarding amyloidosis Awareness Month proclamation request. So this organization has actually been recognized by proclamation before. So I'm wondering if there is an appetite for a motion regarding this request. Moved by Councillor Marchand. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Mumberket. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion is carried. And as part of this, I'm happy to share all this information in amyloidosis, which I Googled so I would have a fighting chance at pronouncing right. But I do not have to read it in French, right? We can just, so it's in French. If you'd like to see it on the website, feel free. Whereas March is Amyloidosis Awareness Month, a month dedicated to raising awareness, funding research, and supporting those living with amyloidosis and their loved ones. And whereas amyloidosis is a group of diseases that occurs when an abnormal protein, known as the amyloid, builds up in the tissues and organs of the body. Left untreated, the disease can result in organ failure and can be fatal. And whereas amyloidosis can mimic the signs and symptoms of more common medical conditions, and the disease can be challenging to diagnose. And whereas amyloidosis often affects people who are older and middle-aged, however, younger people have been diagnosed with this disease. And whereas some of the signs and symptoms of amyloidosis can include shortness of breath, weight loss, fatigue, swelling in the ankles and legs, numbness in the hands and feet, foamy urine, carpal tunnel syndrome, bruising around the eyes, and an enlarged tongue. And whereas early diagnosis can lead to better outcomes for both patients and their families. And whereas raising awareness about the amyloidosis diseases, including hereditary and non-hereditary forms of the disease, can contribute to building of healthier communities across Canada. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Warden Lois Landry, on behalf of Richmond County Municipal Council, do hereby proclaim March 25th as Amyloidosis Awareness Month in the Municipality of the County of Richmond, dated at Arishat, Nova Scotia, this 14th day of January 2025. Moving along, the next item that requires some action on our part is from Kathleen Jeffrey, Interim Director of Finance, and it is the grant application from the Isle Madame New Horizons Seniors Club for the infrastructure grant funds in the amount of $5,000. That information is in your package from pages 169 to 186. I do want to note that Councillor Sampson is not here today, but I have been in touch with him and have discussed this at length with him, and I'm certainly not looking to preempt any discussion, but I do want to let folks know that he and I are both prepared to offer $750 each from our district funds toward this project. So I just want to make folks aware of that. So looking for some discussion or motion in the form of a decision about how we respond to this request. Deputy Warden?
I'll make a motion, I guess I get some discussion started here, to support this to the tune of $5,000, $1,500 coming from Districts 1 and 2 funds, and the remainder coming from the regional fund.
Okay, motion on the floor to, just for more clarity, $750 from District 1, $750 from District 2, remainder coming from regional funds for the grant request attached. Any discussion? Sorry, yes, from the, is it from the infrastructure? Yep, it's from infrastructure grant?
Infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure, yeah, sorry.
I'll second that one.
Seconded by Councillor Mumberket.
So 1 and 2 and 3,500.
Any discussion on that motion? It is, yeah. It's an important part of the community. Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next and last requiring action is in your package, if you're following along, page 187 to 205. Kathleen Jeffrey, Interim Director of Finance, for a grant application from the Richmond Boxing Club for a Type 4 Regional Health General Grant funds in the amount of $10,000. So that information is provided. It's a request from, as I said, the newly formed Boxing Club. So looking for a motion perhaps to start that discussion, or did I? Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I'd be willing to make the motion for this in the full amount. I know it's a large amount. I'm just looking at their constraints and after, reading through the information they provided us. But that being said, I'd be willing to put in 2,000 from the District 5 funds towards this. Yeah, 2,000 from the District 5 with the remainder coming out of the region.
Just so I'm clear, what you're saying then is 2,000 from you with the remaining 8 to come from somewhere else, right?
Yeah, if there's a seconder.
Councilor Member?
So I'd be willing to put 500 in from my, oh, sorry, thank you. I'd be willing to put 500 in from my district fund as well. So that would be 2,500 from the district funds and then 7,500 from the regional, if you would accept that amendment, Deputy Warden?
I'll never argue with that.
Okay. In that case, I'll second the motion. Thank you.
Sure. Deputy, or Councilor Mershon?
So it's seconded, just on discussion. Does this,
Did you just second something?
no, I thought you seconded.
Yeah, okay, great, okay.
Yeah.
So we're seconding the motion, 2,000 from District 5 funds, 500 from District 4 funds. Go ahead, Councillor.
Does this not fall under infrastructure?
Okay.
The only problem with that is the maximum. So I don't know where you want to go with it, but I just want to bring that up.
I think there are some facilities that certainly are doing the things listed under that Type 4 Regional Health General. I think their argument is that they are, when you read the letter, it sounded to me like they were trying to convince us, that rightly so, that they are an organization that is doing things regionally that are really involve the health. And so they have made a decision to apply under that they're very capable people who had the option to consider other ways of applying for that, and that's what they chose. So I think that's what we're going with. So the motion on the floor is for $500 from District 4, $2,000 from District 5, with the remaining $7,500 to come from the Type 4 Regional Health General Grant Funds. Any other discussion on that? Councillor?
Just one other comment I wanted to say is that I think also kind of contributing to my desire to support this project is that they have taken a community asset that was at risk and, taken it under their wing, and otherwise, that community would have lost that space. And I know there's a long history of activity. Many merchandise bingos have been held in that space, so I'm really glad to see them, rescuing it and repurposing it and moving forward. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or discussion on the motion that's on the floor?
Just one other thing.
Yes, Councillor.
When they say they applied for other financial assistance, but they don't list it, does anyone know if they did?
I'm not sure on the specifics where they'd applied, but I know I'd spoken to them a while back. This was probably the day of the open house, maybe. They weren't successful in any, and I think that's why they weren't listed, yeah.
And just a note that our package includes the deed to the facility, so they really only took ownership of that in December, and I think their needs are pretty dire. I think they describe it like it rains inside when the weather is bad. So there is a motion on the floor. Do we have any other comments, discussion? Hearing none, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. The next items are correspondence that are only for your information. So there are a few pieces, one from the municipality, which is the information about the multi-use facility feasibility studies, public open houses. So that information is in page 206 of your package. It is also available quite a lot online. I will say that recently it was opened up to include an online survey. So councillors, if any of you use social media, it might not be a bad thing to push that out a little bit. That closes on the 20th. Perfect. Yep. And so great opportunity for people to have their say there. Thoughts? Honorable John Lohr, Minister of Municipal Affairs, has written to us congratulating us for all municipalities. I believe it was referenced that everybody got across the finish line before the December 19th, I think the date was, to adopt the Code of Conduct, so good for us. Then the next two are pieces of correspondence really speak to vacancies we have on some of our committees. So people may remember that we had an opportunity to invite folks to join our committees as citizen representatives, and we were successful in getting some really great people on some of our committees. However, we, on the other side of that, have 3 vacancies. So there are 2 vacancies for the IDEA committee, sorry, two for the Recreation Advisory Committee and 1 for the IDEA Committee. I can certainly speak to the Recreation Advisory Committee. I am the council's rep on that. They do some really important work, so all the work around the multi-use facility feasibility stuff, that's all happening there, and also some really great discussions about programming and some of the challenges and advantages and ways that we can encourage folks to join those and to do that in an equitable way. So if any of that whets your appetite, we really would like to ask you to join that committee. I don't know, Councillor Member Kett, I'm putting you on the spot, but anything you'd like to add about the value of joining the IDEA Committee?
Thank you, Warden. Yeah, I definitely would like to add, we are just, we've just recently changed our name to include a diversity, equity, and inclusion focus in what we do, because we were previously, hyper-focused on accessibility only. So I think it's going to really help to kind of round out the conversation. I would encourage people who have, that kind of first voice experience in particular, to apply to be members. Reach out if you just want to do it on the down low at first to get the lay of the land. We're happy to have some off the record conversations. But it is a really great group, and I have to say, has incredible staff support as well. So thank you to Shannon and Danielle and team for all that you do there. So yeah, and I mean, obviously in some of the missteps we took in the early days, particularly because we're first out of the gate on the inclusion, on the DEI component, we obviously want to press the gas really, all the way to the floor on this to do better and to learn our lessons from each other. So we could definitely use additional voices at the table to make sure that we get it right for Richmond County and for the people who live here. So thank you.
And for both committees, I think it's worth adding that if your lived experience includes mobility issues, or if you just live, for either committee, if you live far away, there is an option to join these online. So you can be a part of this committee and really do important work from home. So don't come looking for us. We're happy to have you. Item 12, as I mentioned, last month we met the first and third week of the month, so as opposed to a little later. So as a result, the checks for November weren't ready. So your package tonight includes the checks from November and the checks from December, because we're back to our regular schedule of meetings. Do we have any comments, concerns, questions about that? Yes, Councillor Marchand?
So, just have one question. There's the checks that go out to cash, is that for a machine at the arena? Oh, okay.
It was a $3,000. I can't recall, but yeah.
Is that a machine, does that cost us anything, or do we?
Madam Chair, if I could defer to our Director of Finance.
We actually own the machine.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask a question for the information only. For the open houses for the facility, did I read somewhere that a decision is going to be made for the location of this? Is that online somewhere?
No. You can actually look up online right now, and it will ask you the 4 questions. One is, what do you like about this facility? What's missing? So very generic like that. There's the what we heard document makes reference to really people's kind of consensus or opinions that it needs to be centrally located, but there has been no conversations about where or locations of land. Yeah, no. You can click on it and see.
So that won't be discussed at these open houses? Good, okay.
Decision is long away, but we're encouraging people to give their opinions and have conversations. And I believe the last question is, any other thoughts? If you would like to give us a latitude, longitude of where you think it would like to, you'd like to have it, fill your boots. So that's conversation that we're just collecting information about people's thoughts. Okay. So moving on to review of the action items. So the action list goes back to 2021, includes items that are on our radar and update on progress. So councillors can certainly ask about any issue anytime. I do want to flag that item 423 is complete. And I feel this deserves mention. The recommendation was to council to draft a letter to the province and have old roads reopened and maintained as a secondary means of travel for emergencies, evacuations, and given the increase of motor vehicle collisions, the need for how that would increase rerouting of traffic. But I do want to let you know that as a result of the advisory committee's conversations with our EMO coordinator, the specific letter was actually at the request of the emergency measures coordinator, was with respect to 2 specific roads. And those were the ones that were identified as the highest priority. And those roads were Irish Cove Road and Sterling Road, 8-mile stretch. And so actually met with the emergency measures coordinator to look at how important that particular asset would be for folks in terms of evacuation, but also the distance that is spanned there and how difficult it is for a fire department that is actually closer as the crow flies to a fire that can't get there because of that road being closed. So I just wanted to stipulate that item happened. I did the letter, but it was amended as such at the request of the emergency measures coordinator. So is there anybody else have any other comments, concerns about any items on the action plan? No, hearing none. There were no items added to the agenda, so we will now open the floor up for our 15-minute question period. We'll take questions from Martin in the gallery if he has any, or anybody by phone. So as usual, you can call 226-9885. Slight delay, so we'll sit here and in case there's any that come in after the delay. And again, this is not restricted to items on the agenda.
Morton, if it's okay, could I just maybe say a little something while we wait for the phone?
Please do.
I just, sometimes in our community acknowledgements, we kind of go around the table and, you know, and I know it's yeah. So I just had a little one. I just wanted to wish Marjorie Mackenzie McKay a very happy 100th birthday. Her birthday was on January 6th, and the municipality provided a certificate. So happy birthday, Marjorie. I hope you had a great day. The party was lovely on the 28th of December. There were 5 pipers in attendance in Lakeside. And if you and a lot of tartan going on, and it was spectacular. So just a happy birthday, Marjorie. Thank you. Thank you, Warden.
Anything, did you have something you wanted to add?
So yeah, another note that I'm sure we'll hear more about this as time goes on. As many people may be aware from the news coverage and so on, we had a resident in the Lordways area had a devastating fire between Christmas and New Year's. It's, you know, it's turning into a positive situation because I just want to give a shout out to the community at large and even within the county, because there's people from beyond the community offering their assistance. Believe it or not, groundwork has already started at rebuilding. Thank you to EDPC and so on for trying to get through these things as quickly as possible. Some great people got on board right away, and things are moving along to rebuild a home for this gentleman who lost pretty well everything. So.
Yeah, that really was something, I don't know if people have been following that, but right away, one business said, we'll do X, and then following that, different businesses said, and we will do this, and we will do that, and I believe they opened up a storage unit for anybody who had any donations that you could start to bring those now. It really was an amazing thing to watch unfold.
It was a domino effect.
It really was, yeah. Yes, apologies. I will do that in the future. You know, it's important for us to acknowledge folks that we want to pay tribute to for all of those things. Those are great stories, and we should share them. So I believe we've let enough time pass such that we haven't had any questions. So since there are no other items on the agenda, I am adjourning this meeting. Thank you.